Hi there and welcome to Geek Legion of Doom. This is a B-movie review. If you've not watched one of these before, this will be a shorter review than normal and it will just be me talking, sorry. Now I will say before we get started, I judge B-movies on a different kind of scale than I will judge normal films or blockbuster films, high budget films. Purely because it's not really fair to sort of judge them in the same category. So we're looking at B-movies and sort of lower budget films based on their own merits really. So today we're going to be looking at Hulk the Slayer, an infamous sword and sorcery film from the 80s, starring Jack Palance and John Terry. But I think it's 1980 it was made, so the light is flashing in my eyes. So it's 1980 that it was made, and is certainly one of the lower budget efforts that were around in the sort of 80s. It essentially tells the story of two brothers, one played by Jack Palance, the other by John Terry, Jack Palance being the antagonist, John Terry being the protagonist. And essentially, John Terry's character, Hulk, the title character, has a magical sword that he can summon out of thin air. And he essentially goes to destroy his evil older brother, who is got a bunch of nuns captive, and they're basically fighting over this, the sword and whatnot. And on the way, Hulk's character encounters sort of a group of fantasy archetypes: an elf, a dwarf, a giant, and I think another human as well. And that's kind of a witch woman as well, actually. And they essentially, it's the story of them sort of travelling to, and to essentially fight him and face him. The action is for its time is still fairly poor, I would say. It has got a certain amount of charm. I think the music's really good in it. It's kind of it reminds me of the sort of the good, the bad, and the ugly. That kind of style of music. Basically the kind of characters. John Terry, I would say, is fairly flat, and Jack Palance, obviously, we all know he can act, and he chews the scenery when he's there. He's very much of a mustache twirling kind of villain, if you know what I mean. The sort of kind of is the Hulk's friends. The giant is basically a big bloke. The dwarf is just a short bloke. The elf is quite good. Is Crow. He kind of, the way they edit it, that he sort of shoots arrows very, very quickly out of his bow, and he's kind of quiet and mysterious. And he's probably my favourite character out of all of them. He's not doesn't have a huge amount of screen time. As the story goes on, essentially they all have a kind of a mini arc where they kind of meet Hulk, and he sort of recruits them, and they have like a little mini arc themselves in there. But it's fairly standard stuff. It's kind of a fun film, and it's, like I say, it does have a certain amount of charm. But the special effects are pretty bad. There's literally silly string. The witch is, firing magic, and it's literally silly string that's flying out of her hands, and there's sort of like with a mist machine. So it's it's a bit laughable even by those standards when you kind of judge it sort of by the likes of like Kroll and Beastmaster and things like that, which arguably aren't masterpieces themselves, but because it's so hokey, it gives it that sort of charm. Now, out of 10, I would have to give it probably a 4.5 out of 10, and a lot of that is just because it's kind of fun. It's a fun film, even though it's still quite a bad film. There are better fantasy films out there. Certainly, like the ones I've mentioned, I would consider superior. But if you just want a bit of a laugh, and it's also mentioned in Spaced as well, if you're a fan of that show, so it has historical value because of that. Give it a watch. All right, cheers, bye.